Hi everyone, it's Gabe and we are going to do another vintage thrifting tutorial, not really, video today, and I am super excited. I think I've gotten a few requests for something like this, and I know other people have done videos like this and they've done it as sort of a vlog, like while they're thrifting, but I thought it would be interesting to use stuff from kind of like my own wardrobe and just talk about what I do when I'm not sure if something is vintage or not, or what my checklist is to figure out if something's vintage or not. So let's just get into it. So sorry if you hear scratching or plastic bags and stuff. Sappho is in here and being a little girl running around. So my first thing, this is the big thing that I use to figure out if something's vintage other than just like style and, you know, looking at it. It's if it has a fabric tag or a printed tag. And if you don't know what I mean, I will have examples. So say just like a modern shirt from like Target or Hot Topic or something like that will usually nowadays have a printed tag, which is where the information and the size and the brand and stuff is printed onto the shirt, kind of like the actual print itself. I believe they do this because it's cheaper, and it's cheaper than creating like a whole new piece of fabric and sewing it on. And this has been a thing that people have done, like that's been popular for maybe only the past like 10 years. So if it has that, you can almost guarantee that it's not vintage. Baby girl, come here. But if you do see some with a fabric tag, that is not a guarantee that it is actually vintage, because some modern brands do still use fabric tags. Like, this is a bad example because they're not technically modern anymore. American Apparel had fabric tags up until its demise. But this is a late 90s, early 2000s top from this 90s brand, You're It, which is actually one of my favorites. I love this top, and you can see it's just a fabric tag, and it's attached and like sewn on, and sometimes there'll even be more than one tag. And a lot of like 90s brands, they'll have like a really unique, like cool text. Hey baby girl. But yeah, that is my number one tip. Another thing is a little more specific, the font on the tag. So this is kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of it and identifying even older things. So say a top from the 90s won't have the same kind of tag as a top from the 60s. And if you're trying to figure out if something, because there was a big 60s trend in the 90s, and if you're trying to figure out if something is actually from the 60s or actually from the 90s, this can be really helpful. So again, I'll show you the 90s tag, and you can see that the font on it is very like uniform, like it looks like it could be printed like on a computer nowadays. And then what this tag, this is a authentic dress from the 60s, you can see that the tag is actually looks like it's been printed by a typewriter almost. So it kind of has that older font. Another thing is that a lot of vintage clothing don't have like huge text tags like these that like you're supposed to just cut off. This is just a modern Forever 21 skirt from their Keith Haring collection. But yeah, so usually if you see that, it might not be vintage. It's not a 100% thing though. It's very hard to tell, and took me a long time to figure this out. But when you're looking at band t-shirts or like other things that are easily recreated, it's very, very easy to end up thinking you have a real when you have a fake. I have a perfect example of this. I just found a vintage My Chemical Romance shirt from, I believe, 2003 or 2004. And the way I was able to tell is one, by the tag, because if it was a Hot Topic remake, it wouldn't have an actual fabric tag. It would have the printed Hot Topic logo. And the fabric on Hot Topic shirts, if you know, they are a lot of the times very thin. And the print, there's not a lot of texture in the print of the actual band logo. And so this one, it had a very thick, like hard logo, and it was a very thick material. And actually, there wasn't even a tag, there was half of a tag, it was ripped off. But I knew that because there was a presence of a tag in the first place, that it was most likely vintage. Another thing, since it's Christmas, there are going to be a lot of like Christmas sweaters out, and figuring out the difference between a vintage sweater and a modern sweater can be kind of difficult. But Christmas sweaters from the 80s are usually very, very thick, and the collars are even very thick, and they're usually not as comfortable. They have more of a scratchy feeling, and a lot of times they can be made out of acrylic instead of cotton or a knit. One thing, it's usually easier to just figure out by the style, which I will go on in my next thing. So another thing that really helps is research on the style of clothing from certain eras, and that's something that you have to build up and do research on. And so I would suggest going on Pinterest, looking at old catalogs like Delia's and stuff like that, and you will start to understand like, oh, well, this is something that can't be easily recreated, or if it is, it does have some slight differences. And so you can start figuring out the difference between authentic and recreation vintage. There are many things that are popular now that were super popular in the 90s, like mock neck tops with like a half zip, stuff like that. I have so many of those. I would say my last advice, one of the biggest things that I sell is stuff from the kids section, like the little girls section. In the bigger sizes, it's easy to find stuff that could fit a modern woman. And it can be hard sometimes to figure out sassy early 2000s tops and see how different they are from like a modern kids top, but after a while it's pretty easy. Again, you can look at the tags and stuff, and also the designs of it are a lot different. Like I'll put an example of a vintage one here and of a modern like Justice shirt here, and they usually look very different. They have a different kind of print. They have a little bit of like the stylistic difference is pretty easy to tell. I just don't think they're as cute. I think they're a little like obnoxious looking, but again, I am not a 9 or 10-year-old girl, and I'm not here to judge, so I'm just here to tell you what is vintage and what's not. So anyways, that is all the wonderful advice I have for you today, and thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry, this is like my first video since I've got her that Sappho hasn't actually been in it, but she's been pretty vocal. Hope that will suffice. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Did I start like saying like, comment, subscribe and stuff like that? I feel like that's kind of like a thing a YouTuber like has to do, and I just don't do it because I forget. So like, I guess like, comment, subscribe. I'm trying to get to 3K. Woo. Okay.